Amen. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, so we need to do some refreshing of our memories first as we get started on this teachings about the parables. It's going to be a series of weeks. We're going to go through the Messiah's parables on the kingdom, and that's the source, the subject matter of each one. The kingdom of heaven is like. It's sometimes said explicitly, other times it's just implied, but all of his teachings are about the kingdom of heaven being like. Introducing the kingdom of heaven to ordinary human beings. We're going to talk about the parabolic way of teaching and why Yeshua used this and what it's supposed to do to us. But before we get to that stage, we kind of need to probably rehearse or rewind or remember what is the basic essence of the theme of Yeshua's teaching in general. The kingdom of heaven is the subject matter, and particularly make teshuvah, repent, as the English Bible say. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. It's right there, very close, very near, what we talked about in the first part of the session, about the nearness of the Holy One and the nearness of his kingdom. So we're talking about, first of all, the subject matter is the kingdom, and the specific subject matter within the subject matter is how close it is and how much we're supposed to press into it. So that's what he's going to be talking about with regard to the parables, as he was with regard to the teachings he just did in the Sermon on the Mount. The difference between the Sermon on the Mount and the parable teachings is who he's talking to. The Sermon on the Mount, who was he talking to? The 12, or the ones he'd called. I don't know if it's all 12 by that time or not. But he was talking to his own disciples, and he was talking to them very plainly and going right to the heart of the matter. And it was like you could have taken notes. Could have taken notes and kept those notes as some sort of a treasure, because these notes are just gold. The things that he said were just layer upon layer of beautiful wisdom. And the parable is going to be something different. He's going to talk to somebody else. Who's he going to talk to with regard to the parables? The multitudes. So the ones he told us, he said, the multitudes wait for you, basically, down below at the bottom of the mountain. This is them. And he's about to show us how to communicate with the multitudes. And it's not going to be layer upon layer of teaching. It's not going to be sermons. He's going to tell stories. He's going to tell pointed stories and believe that those stories have more impact to the ones who are on the outside of the kingdom than any levels of doctrine or teaching or layers of wisdom might be. If you tell a story the right way, he thinks, you can communicate in ways that ordinary teaching will never do. So why is that? What's the nature of these stories? Well, in Hebrew, the Hebrew word that we translate as parable would be mashal. The book of Proverbs is called Mishle, which is a plural form of mishal. And the idea of mashal is to take put things that are like next to each other. To think in grade school or kindergarten or whatever, Sesame Street used to do it. Two of these things are like each other, and one of them is different. Which one is not like the others, or whatever? Yeah, exactly. You remember. Diane remembers. And the idea is, part of the nature of having toddlers or having children is you get to learn what's like and what's not like. And so that's why a mashal is the Hebrew way of saying we're going to talk about things that are like. So that's why Yeshua is going to say the kingdom of heaven is like. He's going to lay out certain things that are like each other. The Greek parabole, which we get parable from, and we actually take it literally from parabole. Parabole means to put and lay alongside. So you're probably going to put like things alongside, but the idea is, again, you're laying things alongside. Parabole, you put things alongside one another. So what are these parables? They're stories. The thing about these stories is the storyteller makes them special. The subject matter makes them special. And the timing and the sequence of his telling the story context makes it special. So what is the idea of a parable? And first of all, before we get to that stage, there are 39 parables of Yeshua that are recorded for us in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Testament. Now, we probably told a bunch more stories, but those are the ones that are actually recorded, 39 of them. And all of them are really around all the same theme. What are your favorite parables? What are the parables you remember most? Because we're going to talk about a lot of these parables. I want to make sure I hit some of these ones that are your favorites, but what's your favorite parables? The wedding parable, okay, the parable of the wedding. There's a couple of parables of weddings, so we got that. We got the parable of the oil, the bridegroom and the bride and the oil. We got the parable of the wedding garment. So they got a couple of those parables all about the wedding. Maybe probably several of them more about the wedding. What else? What? The parable of the virgins, exactly. The parable of the wedding, the parable of the virgins. It's in one of those parables of the wedding. Yeah. And the parable, how about the parable of the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan? How about the parable of the prodigal son? Yeah. And my favorites, I mean, how to say a favorite, but one of my favorites would be the parable of the shepherd and the 99 sheep, you know? What shepherd would there be among you if they had 100 sheep, but one sheep went astray, would not leave the 90 and the 9 and go and find the 9, and when they find him would rejoice over the one more than over the 100? And it's like, this is the kingdom of heaven. This is how the kingdom of heaven operates. It's not logical. It's not doctrinal. It doesn't operate that way. But when you read that parable, something inside me says, I'm the sheep. You're in it. It's not a story. It's not just a tale somebody's telling. It's your story. Same thing with regard to the Good Samaritan. I'm the guy who got beat up and was dying on the side of the road. Same thing about the prodigal son. I'm the guy who was shucking corn husk in the pigsty. We identify with these stories, and he knows we will. He tells the story, so we will identify with it. So it's not just we're hearing a story, we're living that story. So this is the idea of how he teaches about stories. The kingdom of heaven is like, it's not a bunch of doctrines and theologies and creeds and belief systems. It's about what happens when heaven touches earth. When everything changes because heaven touched earth. This is what the parable's about. And they're all about this one theme about make teshuvah, return, repent, because the kingdom of heaven is right here. So what happens when the kingdom of heaven hits you, when you have this intersection? It's not that you suddenly have all the answers. It's that the questions seem less important. You know, people talk about what happens when you have an encounter with God. The idea of the parables is every parable is supposed to be an encounter with God. As you enter into the parable story and become the prodigal son, or become the one who was dead, dying on the side of the road to Jericho, or become the sheep that was the one lost that 99 stayed, or become the Lazarus character in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, or any of the other parables we're talking about, all of them are supposed to be, we're in it, and now we're encountering something that's just beyond logic and reason to believe. We can't quantify it. It's like, what is the kingdom of heaven? And I'll go through this exercise of telling you what are the elements of the kingdom, of a kingdom. We're going to talk about that and realize that's not going to define this kingdom for us. If I give you all the elements of what a kingdom is, and I talk to you about the kingdom of heaven, all those elements are going to be saying, yeah, they make sense, but it just doesn't hit me the right way. But your parable just knocked me upside the head. And I suddenly realized the kingdom is wonderful and marvelous and great. And I'm the one sheep that he left the 99 for. And suddenly that matters. That tells me about the kingdom more than anything you could touch me about all your creeds and your doctrines and your teachings. So, what are the elements of the kingdom? Let's go through the exercise, even though it's a futile exercise when you get to the end of it. First thing, what's the first thing you got to have if you're going to have a kingdom? A king, all right? You got to have a willing and a capable king. If you're going to have a kingdom, he's got to be the center of everything. A king who is this is, if we want to get a little bit of idea about the kingdom of heaven, we're not the king. Our church is not the king. Our ecclesiastical structure is not the king. The prophet pastor combination is not the team, not the king. The king is the king. And he's glorious and he's wonderful, he's majestic, and he's awe-inspiring and awe-directing. And we can't stop thinking about the king. So the king is the center point, and he has to be willing and capable. And oh, is our king ever willing and capable? Okay, so the first thing you have to have is a king. The second thing you have to have in a kingdom is the subjects. Somebody has to consider him the king. There has to be somebody out there who's listening to what he says and responding to who he is and actually knows he's the king. So king plus subjects, we got the good start here. King plus subjects. Okay, so are we good subjects? Does what the king says and wants matter to us? This is, I think, where the kingdom differs from the church, as we know it, at least. In the church, all that matters is the doctrine and the creed. In the kingdom, he matters. It's all about him. And it's all about us responding to him the way he deserves to be responded to and being subjects to the king. So the king is the center point of all the parables, and the kingdom is us who will listen and respond and realize that we need to do so humbly, without arrogance and without pride. And we listen for what the king has to say and be willing to do it at any cost. So the king and the kingdom, the subjects. Then he has to have an area of domain, a geographical center point of domain. A king has a throne, he has a capital, he has a throne, he has a palace, he has a territory. Now, interesting is he has a homeland, and the homeland expands outward, and he has territory. But the territory is all tied to his homeland. Without the homeland, there wouldn't be a territory. And then there's the far reaches, the outer reaches of the influence that go into all the world. So we got the king around the throne, the palace, the throne room, and then we got the territory, and then we got the outer reaches of influence. That's what makes a kingdom. That's the big stuff, right? This is a big deal. We haven't even got to the idea of what's at the center of all this throne that he sits on and the scepter that he wields. The idea that he actually issues decrees. He's active and alive and issuing decrees, making decisions for us. And his decisions are what matter, not our decisions. His decisions matter more than what we want. And he's the king. That's what a king does and what a subject does with regard to his king. So in all these territories out there, in all these realms of what we're in, there's somebody listening and tuning who is actually listening to what the king says. And then he has an administration who goes about and publicizes that. So what else have we got? We actually have that body of decrees. The kingdom of heaven has a body of decrees. We call it the Torah. Or he has this constitution and laws that people operate under, the system that people operate under. But it's only one part of the kingdom. The real thing is the kingdom himself. But this is without a body of law, without a constitution, without a Torah, you can't have a kingdom. It's just a relationship, but not a kingdom. So he said, if the kingdom of heaven is at hand, it involves all these things. And I could go deeper into that process. Any other thoughts about what a kingdom has to have? Anybody? Okay, so we have to have an economy. We have to have something that lets people live and feeds them and takes care of them in some regard. So yes, the economy of the kingdom is funded and fueled by the king and his wise decrees that keeps it, manages it. So we have these things going on. Now, so I've told you in advance that my elements of the kingdom don't really help you a whole lot, other than maybe give you a picture of what we're talking, how big this thing we're talking about is, how important this part of our life is. So what is the kingdom of heaven? He said, well, I'm going to tell you stories about it where you will encounter it. And when you encounter it, you're going to know. I mean, I still can't read the parable of the prodigal son without it taking my breath away. I pray I never can. There are certain things that happen when you encounter him in these parables. The prodigal son, that moment when he decides in the awakening in the pigsty, I'm going home. I've had enough of this. This is terrible. This is a bad mistake. I'm going home. And I'm making up all the way. I'm making up the story I want to tell. I'm making my plans about how I'm going to do this. And logically, I just want to go back as a servant, man. I'll just go back I just want to be in his household. I don't deserve any recognition as a son. I just want to be back in the household and eat of his table and just be there back in his kingdom. And so that's what we're thinking as we're going along. And then there's that moment when we're expected to run up to him and fall on our faces and beg his forgiveness. And he didn't give us that chance. It says he ran. He picked up his robes and he ran to the son. He said, and you feel it. Do you understand? This is the kingdom of heaven just hit you. This is what the kingdom of heaven is. It's not in doctrines. It's not in theology. It's not what you thought in your head. It's something heavy when the kingdom of heaven meets earth and in your real lifetime. And that's what takes place. So it happens. And then he doesn't just hug you and bring you back. He starts gathering stuff and putting it on you. And can you imagine standing there? And he puts a ring on your finger? And he wraps you in his own robe? And he gets sandals for your feet and wash it. I mean, this is incredible. This is the kingdom of heaven touching earth. This is what the kingdom of heaven is like. What happens to you on the road to Jericho? You're broken. You can't help yourself. You've been beat up. You've been wounded by the world. You really have no way out of it. You're just waiting to die. And the religious folk are just passing by you on the right and on the left and not paying attention to you, and they don't want to touch you, and you kind of understand why. And then all of a sudden, here comes this guy you didn't expect, and the kingdom of heaven hits him. He's just a Samaritan. You didn't expect anything from him. Out of nowhere comes a Samaritan out of nowhere, and he begins to pick you up and heal you and soothe you and speak lovingly kind words to you and begin to bind up your wounds and actually puts you on his donkey or his horse and carries you to an inn and pays the shopkeeper to take care of you and feeds you. And you say, well, how did that happen? The kingdom of heaven happened. It's not because the Samaritan was somehow more holy. It was because the kingdom of heaven hit the Samaritan. And when the kingdom of heaven hits somebody, it changes everything in the equation. The kingdom of heaven is like that. What about the parable of rich man and Lazarus? I mean, we try to draw doctrines out of these parables. Just let the feeling of it rush over you. Let the encounter rush over you. This man clothed in purple all his life. He just walked by Lazarus every single day. Lazarus was at his doorstep. He was at his neighborhood. Just walked right by him every single day. And Lazarus was out there lying there suffering and letting the dogs lick of his wounds and just horrible stuff. And the rich man just didn't ever see it. Just didn't ever want to see it. Just walk right by it every time. But there's a time comes when they both die. And now, you see, what was valuable in life? What was important in life? What was so important that I didn't see Lazarus? What was so important that I didn't see the hurting one, the wounded one? Why didn't the kingdom of heaven hit me? I didn't even let the kingdom of heaven hit me, because if it had, I'd been like the guy on the road to Jericho, the Samaritan who kingdom of heaven hit. I never let the kingdom of heaven hit me, transform me. What about my brothers that are beyond me? What about the what's going to happen to them? They don't see it either. How can somebody go back from the dead? And you see how these stories are designed to have an encounter with the kingdom of heaven and with God. And what happens when you read it, when you read this stuff? Now, if you're intellectual, pseudo-intellectual, it's going to hit there and you're going to come up with some kind of theory as to why this is that or why this is that. No, it's just a confusing thing. But if you're a seeker of God and your heart is open and you're listening, suddenly you feel this sense of fear of God, the reverence, the wonder, the awe. And every one of these parables is designed to build in anyone who's willing to listen a sense of reverence and awe and wonder at the creator of the universe and how wonderful he is and how wonderful his kingdom is. So you sense this wonder and awe. And what else when you have these encounters? You sense a sudden warmth, a sense of trembling, maybe, a little bit of trembling. I still do. I tremble when I read the story of the prodigal son or the lost sheep, the one with the 99. You get a little shiver goes down your spine. You realize this is something happened in this story that's different than ordinary life. And then you feel the sense of overwhelming calm. If you can read the story of the sheep with the 99, that he left the 99 and went to the one, and still be angry at somebody, you weren't really listening to the story. Still be critical and judgmental of somebody else after reading and meditating on that parable for a few minutes, you just missed the whole thing. It didn't hit you. But if it hits you, it's like suddenly what seemed important, that offense you had a minute ago, it just isn't that important. As a matter of fact, it's kind of like, forget that. I have been touched by the King. I have been awakened in my neshama, in my deep eternal spirit. Something has awakened to me, and suddenly I know everything's going to be all right. God's working all things together for good. I know it's going to be all right. Suddenly there's maybe a little fragrance of just pleasing, fragrant aroma, a sense of well-being, that shalom. This is what happens to you when the kingdom of heaven confronts you through these parables. That's what he wants to do. Of course, you can miss it. And oh, for the ones who miss it, it's too bad. I think the disciples were the ones who missed it most of the time. What do you mean by this parable? If you have to ask me, you didn't get it. You didn't get the encounter. You only want to know the doctrines and the theologies and the creeds behind this whole story. You don't need to know who the sower was, but I'll tell you. You don't need to know what the seed is, but I'll tell you. You don't need to understand what the rocky ground is and the roadway is, the pathway is. You don't need to know all this stuff, but I'll tell you because you weren't listening. You didn't get the message. Now let's go. Let's go into the first parable. First parable is the sower and the seed. First kingdom parable. Matthew 13, beginning of verse 1. But you got to hear me now. You got to be in this parable. This is not something you read and just read. So if you have to close your eyes or just think for a minute, you're standing there somewhere, wherever you are, outside, and someone comes along and slips a bag of seed around your shoulders, around your neck, and now you find yourself and you've got a bag of seed all around your front and the back, and you are the sower. This is your job. This is who you are. You are the sower. What are you going to do with the seed? What are you going to do with the seed? So he says the sower went forth to sow. Do we know what we got, what we're carrying? Do we understand the depth and the value of what we're carrying? And do we understand the places we're sent to go? So he says, the sower went forth to sow, and some of the seed fell. Did you just hear what he said? He didn't say he threw the seed on the roadway. Some of the seed fell on the roadway. What is that? Some of the precious seed that we were responsible for carrying, that they put around our shoulder, some of the seed we let it slip out. We just didn't steward it very well. We didn't take good care of it, and so it falls on the rock on the roadway where it's all been trampled down and hard ground. And so what happens when seed hits the ground? He says, I'll tell you what happens. You watch it. Look at it. Look at the birds come get it. See the birds, see the blackbirds and the crows and the buzzards. See them coming down, flying, flocking down. See this right where you are, and they're all around you. They're telling the tale that you've been letting the seed go out without any understanding of what you were doing. You just let it go. You loosely let the seed be released. So as you see the birds taking this precious seed, okay, so he says, and some of it, sower went forth, and some of it fell on rocky ground. And on rocky ground, it came up. It was shallow ground, but it came up. It sprouted really quickly, but then the heat came and withered it, and it died. Again, it wasn't that he scattered it. He sowed it on that seed. He just dropped it. It just fell on that rocky ground. By now you'd think he learned, be more careful with your seed, but no, but he went forth again, and he sowed it, and it fell among thorns and thistles, and the thistles came up and choked it out, and choked it to death. And he said, well, we're not taking very good care of this seed, are we? We're not taking very good care. We're doing a bad job of dispensing this seed, this precious cargo that we've been given to give. You and me and I have been very careful, not less than careful, I should say, in taking care of, to put it where it's supposed to go. He says, and here's the good, it ain't over yet. The story is not over yet. He says, then some of the seed, it says it fell on good ground. Again, we're not doing it. It's just slipping out. It's just falling out. It's not a matter of us being strategically wise sowing the seed. It's like we're bumbling and fumbling and like idiots out in the field, and some of it's falling. Fortunately, some of it falls on good ground. And in that good ground, it produced 100-fold. Some of it did. Some of it produced 60-fold. Some of it produced 30-fold. And 30-fold's doggone good. Really, really good. 60-fold is incredible, and 100-fold is just out of this world. And we sit there shaking our heads and say, how did that happen? We don't know what we're doing down here with this seed bag. With the stuff we've been given, the precious things we've been given, we don't know what we're doing with it, but somehow or other it's producing this harvest. And even if we're messing up really badly and not paying attention to where it's going, it's feeding birds, feeding somebody's taking care of here. And so we say, okay, what do we feel like when we get through with this whole parable? What happened to us? Where did we encounter the kingdom of heaven? Any thoughts on this? Where did the kingdom of heaven come in? Where did the operation of something we cannot control, cannot understand, beyond the realm of reason or logic? Where does this come into this parable? Well, first of all, I think we're all humbled by the fact that we're really bad stewards. Right? I mean, we don't know how to do this thing. And we're supposed to feel that way, that we do not know how to do this. We've been given the things of the kingdom, and we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to take care of it, and we're doing it wrong most of the time. And even yet, in the right time, with the right situation, with the right conditions, God works and we provide amazing things happen. And we can sit and say, boy, look at me, how good I sowed. He said, I'm looking at the birds eating the grass, the stuff on the hard road. I'm looking at the thorns and thistles choking out the growth. I'm looking at the ones that are withering in the sun, and I'm smiling at you, and I love you anyway. But you understand it ain't because you're so good at what you do. It's because I'm so good at what I do. Because I care enough about this world to make sure it is producing and fruitful. And I'll use even a really bad farmer like you. I'll use a really bad farmer like you to bring about a really good result. Now, welcome to the kingdom of heaven. Welcome to that sense of all's going to work out all right. Even a little bit of humility on my part is probably needed. A lot of humility. I need to be a subject, not try to be the king, because my sowing capabilities are not up to any level of expertise. Now, that's an interesting phenomenon that he gives. And the disciples come to him and says, what did you mean? And I used to think, well, yeah, they really want to dig in. And now I read this and I say, I'm really embarrassed, because I would probably have been among the same group asking the same question, as opposed to saying, here am I, send me. If the kingdom of heaven hits you and you encounter the king, I don't need to understand. I just need to do what you tell me to do. I just want to serve you. I want to honor you. I want to do whatever you want me to do. That's all I care about. I don't have to know the answers. As a matter of fact, I'm better off if I don't know the answers. But the disciples illustrated that they needed to know the answers. So what does this mean? What does this parable mean? And he goes off in this amazing discussion. He says, I can speak to the multitudes in parables because it's not given to them to know. In other words, the kingdom of heaven is enough for them. The impact of the kingdom of heaven in their lives is enough. It's like, think about this. The man born blind in John. Man born blind. All these years he's been blind. One day Yeshua's in the temple, going to the temple, and he prays for him, and he lays hands on him, and he's healed, and he sees. And now all of a sudden the Pharisees and the Sadducees are upset, one kind of upset. And they come to him and he says, well, this man who laid his hands on you, who was he? Well, was he a sinner? Theologically, who was this guy? Who was this guy? He says, whether he was a sinner or whether he wasn't a sinner, I don't know, and I don't care. I was blind, and now I see, and that's enough for me. There's the multitudes who receive the blessing of the parables or the encounters with the living God. I don't have to know the theology behind it. I was blind. You don't understand. I was blind. And now I can see, and he touched me, and I'm not the same anymore. And the theological questions you can answer in the seminaries. But I'll tell you what, I want to talk about him the rest of my life. I'm going to tell his story the rest of my life. And all I got to tell him is that I was blind. He touched me, and now I see, and that's enough. Now he says to the disciples, I know those guys didn't get it. You know? But I won't tell you the story here. The sower is the Son of Man. The seed is the word of the living God. Now, I hope that it's sort of hitting you even yet. Do you know what you carry? Do you know what you've been entrusted? The creator of the universe has entrusted the power of his words, knowing that you don't know what you're doing with them. I don't know what I'm doing. The more I think I do, the less I do. It's sort of humbling. It's sort of wonderful in the same sense. It's like, I can mess this up, but I can't mess it up so bad he can't fix it. I can cause some short-term harm by doing this wrong. But I can't change his grand plan for redemption and restoration that's going to happen no matter what. Well, I hope that you just had an encounter with the kingdom of heaven right now. So he says, and the seed is the word of the living God. what does that mean? You go to quote scriptures? Or you just know what he has to say at a given moment because you've been in the kingdom. You've been around the throne. You've been listening to the decrees. And you don't have to quote a King James Version. You can just speak, and it's the very oracles of God come out. We have been given this ability to speak this stuff. So he says, okay, and the roadway, the pathway, where people travel, trod. Then the rocky ground. And we're talking about people's hearts and where their lives are to give them. Everybody you see out there that you could possibly release the word of the living God to, a message or an oracle or a decree, you could mention anything about, you could talk about the Holy One or his ways with everyone out there is at a different level of receptivity. Everybody out there has thorns and thistles in their life. Everybody out there has hard places where people have stomped on them, like the roadway. Every one of them has different blistering places where the sun is hot and burning them. And everyone out there is going through stuff, guys. Don't expect that somehow you're going to just speak the right words and they're going to just automatically fall in line. Don't go in there with expectations that somehow or other, but if you say it all the way I tell you to say it, if you follow the rules, that somehow everybody's going to follow along and say, yes, 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 yes. No, you're dealing with roadway people, roadkill people. You're dealing with thorn and thistle people. And you're dealing with hot sunshine bearing down and burning the soul to people. And somewhere down there's probably some good soil too. So can you look past the roadway part of it? Can you look past the trampled portion and the thorn and the thistle portion? Can you keep sowing even whenever it's part of it's getting eaten by vultures and birds, and part of it's being burned up by the sun, and part of it's being choked up by thorns and thistles? Can you believe there's still somebody some place down there in those hearts that's good seed? That's the kingdom of heaven. That's an encounter with God right there. To realize that even the hardest, crusty soul has some good soil down inside. Even the most wounded, broken of the people of the earth we might talk to, the ones that irritate us the most, there's still some good soil down there somewhere. If we're just patient enough to follow his instructions and just keep sowing that seed. Now, that's a fascinating story, fascinating encounter. And on one hand, we want to say, well, the disciples got all this information. But on the other hand, it was like, I think I was okay with just having the Holy One's kingdom meet me, and I was blind, but now I see. Every one of these parables is like that. It has a different level at which he meets with us. And he's going to be spending a lot of time talking about parables, talking about the kingdom of heaven is like. So I guess as I kind of take a break and let y'all think and talk for a minute, what do these parables mean to you? How about the parable of the sower and the seed, first of all, or the prodigal son, or the... Okay. Kind of explain what you mean by that.
Well, I always looked at it as he was the sower, and I was the good ground, the rocky ground, the thorny ground, whatever. That's the way I've always looked at it. I didn't look at it like I'm the sower, and it's my responsibility to sow the seed, and let God do the rest, so to speak. I had somebody tell me one time, because I was frustrated over, sharing and not seeing any results. And they said, well, you're not the Holy Spirit. That's not your job. Your job is, just to sow the seed. And so it just really hit me different hearing it from this light.
And to be honest, to be fair, it's both.
Yes.
It is both He is the sower of the seed, and because we're in Him, we become the sower of the seed. And ultimately, the story comes down to us. And the idea is, okay, so we can watch Him. He's going to, over the next few weeks, we're going to be seeing Him talk in different contexts and realizing He's just, all this is picturing what we're supposed to be doing. He's going to be giving a parable for every situation, and we're supposed to be able to tell. And how's our storytelling ability? Are we better at preaching or storytelling? I think the answer, we're better at preaching, right? We're better at standing in an ivory tower and looking at people and preaching at them, telling them what's wrong with their lives and trying to control them by virtue of that than we are at telling them stories to see if we can awaken something deep within the good soul of their spirit. And having a vision for them to have good soil down there somewhere. Something that they could be touched at. Not by us, but by the Holy One. So, other thoughts about parables? Troy.
I like the way you brought out it that he didn't just, have this beautifully manicured garden all tilled up and went out there, planting seeds, that this seed it fell, and I was thinking about that. And up in southeast Oklahoma, where I'm from, there's a lot of pine trees and there's a lot of limestone rocks. And every now and again, you'll see one of those pine trees growing right out of one of those rocks because there's a little crack in the rock that has some dirt down in there, and that seed has somehow got down in there. And there's an actual pine tree growing right out of that rock, So even in that bad ground or rocky ground, some will grow. It might be stunted a little bit or something and not do as good as the rest, but some will grow. And then the other thing I was thinking about is how I love the parables, and this one is a really good one in this respect, that God gave us parables to compare to things that we see every day and around. Like you see that pine tree growing out of the rock, and the way that seed can then, God can use that for your seed bag to dump some seed, because you'll be in a conversation with somebody and it may just come up, or you think about this parable when you see that growing out of that rock, or you see a new seed sprout up, and it gives us an opportunity to be able to share the gospel with somebody or share God's kingdom and His word and what it's like, just out of a natural thing that we see every day in life. And to me, that's kind of like His seed falling out of the bag. Our seed falling out of the bag is because we've been with the King and we know the parable and we understand those things in it. That seed can then just fall out, and some of the meaning of it can fall on somebody's ears because we have His interpretation and thing of it in us,
One thing that hits me is about this every year, especially now, is that I was blind and now I see is seed. So as I was a prodigal in the pig sty, shucking corn and eating part of the shucks that I just fed to the pigs, and He brought me home, invited me home, took me in, put robe on my shoulders and a ring on my finger and sandals on my feet, and made me a son again. That's part of seed. It's as much seed as it is have some scripture verse like John 3:16. As a matter of fact, maybe it's more important to be able to have that story that has that meaning to it, that is more real to us than being able to quote a scripture that we just memorized. So what is our seed? and what have we been given? What is our seed? What is our story? What do we have to give the world? The other thing I think is, you mentioned this about the tilled soil. It's like when you give me a finely tilled, prepared field, then I'll take your seed. When everybody's ripe and ready, and I can see the harvest immediately start to come fast, whenever the field's ready for me, I'll take my seed. And I'll go I'll be happy to do your work for you. But I want to see that thing work really well. I want to see it right up. I want no delay. I want no birds come pick it up. I don't want the sun scorching it. You got to understand, I'm an important speaker down here. I'm going to get distracted or to get discouraged if you don't give me the results I want right now. And I really don't feel like I'm trained or capable enough yet to go sow seed. So what do you mean putting this bag around me right now when I don't have a clue what I'm supposed to be doing with it? I'm not ready for this. Anybody ever feel this way? I mean, I think this is part of immaturity, right? And unfortunately, it's also part of maturity. We don't really get over this. We always feel a little overwhelmed by the fact that we're not really well. You can't be trained to tell people you were blind and now you're see. You don't have to be trained to do that. There is no skill. It's just out of the depths of your heart, you proclaim it. And if it's not out of the depths of your heart, it's coming out of your head, or it's what I call, LIFO, last in, first out, whatever you've been listening to. I can always tell church folk, if they've been to church lately, they kind of tend to recite whatever the preacher said the last time they were there. LIFO, last in, first out. Or if they've been in the world, they've been watching politics, they use the phrases of the politics in any context of any relation, and they use the terminology and they have the attitude of the politics. The attitude, the actual phrases, the words, the terminology, it all comes, LIFO, whatever was last in, first out. We just sort of regurgitate what comes out. This is what I see too often. So we always feel like unless we've had an encounter with God, then we don't have much to say. We're going to say whatever was the last thing we heard. But what if we've had an encounter with God? What if we were blind and now we see? What if we were sinners, broken, wounded souls, and we were forgiven and healed and restored? What if we got to tell a story to tell? And what if the psalmist, Psalm 23, everybody like Psalm 23? I don't know anybody yet who doesn't like Psalm 23. Nobody in their right mind would not like Psalm 23. But, it's different when you read it as a poem and you read it as a testimony. The Lord is my shepherd. He's not a shepherd. He's not the shepherd. He's my shepherd. And he provides everything I need. And I never feel like I'm in lack because of him. And he leads me beside the still waters. To have that as a psalm, as a poem, or as a piece of literature is one thing, an allegory. But if you've been with him beside the still waters, and he led you there and you drank, now that's a whole nother story. And people can tell when you read the psalm, or you talk about the psalm, as to whether you've been there or whether you just reading a story. Last in, first out. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. You haven't been in the valley of the shadow of death. If you haven't been walking through the valley of the shadow of death, tempted to fear evil, and then had him come alongside you, and his rod and his staff was there with you, and you made it through the test. That's the story. That's the testimony part of Psalm 23. Now, this is the challenge of the seed. The seed is not really about how much information we have in our head, how much word we can quote, how much scripture we can actually quote or recite. The issue is, what kind of story do we have to tell? What kind of encounter with the kingdom of heaven have we got to recite and talk about? And, this is where it gets kind of embarrassing sometimes, because I think, if you're like me, I can still go weeks at a time without an encounter with God. It's humiliating. It's humbling. It's like John Michael used to say, he said, Dad, most of the stuff we do in church, we could do this whether God was here or not. So can I go hide somewhere? Can I go hide? That's embarrassing. That's humiliating. We don't. This is the whole point of it. Is when is our most recent encounter with the living God, and are we satisfied with the last one being 6 months ago, 6 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago? Or do we need something new and fresh? And do we need these encounters like he talks about when the heaven's close to earth and the Moedim? Do we need to be able to be ready for these meetings that he wants to have with us? So it's a fresh encounter, a fresh visitation, fresh download. That's the beauty of these parables, is they put us all in encounter mode. As long as we allow ourselves to become part of the parable, at least one of the characters in the story. It's funny because he's been doing this all along, right? Of all the Torah, the decree part is this much. You know what most of Torah is? Stories. Stories about Adam and Hava and serpent. Stories about the Nimrod, and stories about Methuselah, and stories about Enoch, and stories about Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Sarah and Rebecca, and stories about Moses and story about Israel. It's all stories. Chapter after chapter after chapter, unit after unit after unit. It's all stories and stories. It's all parables. Say, well, Mr. Bill, it's a historical situation. I'm not denying that. I'm saying, but they're historical stories. The reason they're put in the Torah is not because they're historical. The reason they're put in the story is because they're stories. The reason they're put in the Torah is because they're stories. And they make us encounter. We're on the field with Abraham, running out with our circumcision hurting as we run towards the visitors that are coming to the tent in the heat of the day. We're running, we're falling on our face with Abraham. We're with him. It's not his story, this is our story. We're having these conversations about Sodom. We know what's going to happen to Sodom, what's going to happen, and what are the criteria for which their judgment's going to come, and what can we do about it? We're hopeless. We're helpless in this situation. Well, what are you going to do about this, Father? These encounters, the story of Torah is all a story of encounters. And yeah, there's a little bit of decrees in there too. But the decrees only give some context to the stories. The stories are the main part. So these parables are sort of trying to teach us some things. What's your story? What's your parable? What's your most recent parable? Parables of the presence, parables of the kingdom. Yeah.
Sometimes you don't see results.
Yeah.
It seems like you're sowing, but you don't see results. And this kind of came to me when I was up home this time. My little cabin up there, I was up there probably a month ago, 3 weeks ago. It's probably been a month ago now. And I have an electric weed eater in there, and the weeds had gotten up real tall in front of my slab. So I weed eated that thing down almost to the ground and kind of did a little brush vegetation cleanup. It looked pretty good when I left, but it was just weeds, When I went back this time, with springtime has come around and we've had some rain and stuff, where all that weeds was at, some of the initial seed that I sowed on that hillside, I guess it was laying there dormant or something underneath all that. And some of that grass that I had planted came up. And, every now and then it's that way with the seed that you sow. It may fall on rocky ground and down there and not be in touch with the dirt or not be in touch with something. A lot of seeds have to go through a freeze cycle before they will actually germinate. But the master said, one sows, another waters, another plants, and then the harvest is done by another sometimes. And it's all work of the kingdom. And so, I think a lot of times we've sown these seeds, but they lay there dormant until somebody else comes along and kind of re-sows it, or maybe clear some of the vegetation out of the way like I did up there. And then all of a sudden, wow, there's this beautiful plant that springs up, And so we just need to always be sowing and telling our story, because you never know when that's going to be the one that triggers somebody to germinate that seed that's in them,
You might get a bunch of no's before you get a yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. and not to be offended by the no's. Not to be judgmental toward the no's. They're just stony ground. They got a lot of rocks. They got a lot of stones, a lot of rocks, too much heat. And we probably were there at the same time. Or similar times. And in Matthew 13, Yeshua said about parables, he said, to you it has been given, the disciples, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. Now, I could stop right there for a second. We need to really, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. And I'll humble us all right now and just get us, we have been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. What else are we doing? What are we talking about other stuff for? Other junk. The secrets of the kingdom. So he says, to you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven. But to them it has not been given. Understand, it has not been given to them. So you still got to sow the seed because but you do it differently. So this is why I speak to them in parables, he said. Because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. Shema. Blessed are those, your ears, they shema, and your eyes, they see. Now, here's what we don't need to have. We don't need our testimony to be corrupted by somebody else's doctrines, somebody else's theology, somebody else's creeds, somebody else's teachings. You see where the problem comes in? Our main story is our main story. We were blind and now we see. We were sinners and now we're forgiven and we're being restored to family relationship and to community, unity and involvement and purpose and meaning. And this is our story. Now, what happens is we get doctrine piled on top of that. Not interaction relationship doctrine like Yeshua is trying to teach his disciples here. We get stuff from men. We get people on YouTube telling us it's a flat earth. Or a round earth, or I don't care if that's what they're talking about, we're way off base here. We got people out there on the internet, on YouTube, telling us that it's Yahushua and Yosh, whatever, it's some kind of name, and it's like that's important to them. And you're adding, but your story is what? I was blind. I was blind, but now I see. This is the story, not what name somebody wants to say it is, because there's no way to know. Nobody knows. And nobody can know, and it doesn't matter. Well, the festival started, the new moon of Nisan didn't take place this month, it took place last month or a month before, and it's like, give me a break. That's what we're talking about. The real thing is I was blind and now I see. And we're starting to let YouTubes and social media and preachers add to our story things that are not what he's trying to teach us. Because he wants to open our eyes to see what he wants to show us. And we want to open our eyes and our ears to what some preacher wants to tell to us. This is the challenge where you start adulterating the message he gave to us, the seed, with other stuff, with leaven of the Pharisees, or leaven of Herod, or leaven of the preachers, or leaven of the rabbis, leaven of somebody else. We're trying to add this to the seed. And he says, no, you lost the purity of what you were really saying in the first place. So these parables, this one of the seed is very heart-rending. I think that's the whole story of these parables. If they don't hit you at the level of the heart, then you've missed the point. Are they hitting you at the level of the heart? Are they awakening something in you that says, yes, God. Yes, Lord. I will go where you tell me to go. I will say what you want me to say. I don't have to know it all. I don't have to be right about doctrines, theologies. I don't have to be right about timing and sequence and the end of days. I don't have to know when the tribulation comes and what starts and what. I don't have to know this stuff. I know you. I know what you've done in my life, and that's what's enough for me. Now start adding on the things you want to add in the time, the place, and the way you want to add those things in. This is where we're going to be. We're going to be talking about some amazing things in the story, in the parables. Next week, we're going to talk about the wheat and the tares. And that's your field. That's your enemy. And that's your dilemma. What you going to do when the tares come for you? This is our story. These are stories are our stories. There's not, well, theoretically, I would think that under the circumstances, you might not want to let tear the tares up. You got tares in your field. First instinct is get that rascal out of here. I want that thing out. I want that out of here. Just trust me. I'll be able to take. We'll worry about that. Talk about that more next week. Parable of the tares. We got so many parables to talk about, and I've got to figure out which ones we really have time to discuss in here, as opposed to 39 ones that are there. Mustard seed, one of the shortest ones, the mustard seed parable. Parable of the mustard seed. All this is about what is the kingdom, and how do we get ready to encounter the king and the kingdom and become his subjects and listen to his decrees and learn those things and function and serve him in his territory, in his realm, in his dominion. These are the things we'll learn about in this coming week. Are you looking forward to it? I'm excited about it. Okay. Well, anybody else before we go? Nobody else? Okay. Everybody's quiet today. Shabbat shalom. We'll see you next week.